In this video, I'm going to talk about using a table saw safely. This augments but doesn't replace some of the other training videos that we have, especially the one from the Power Tool Institute. A table saw is really powerful and wonderful tool to use and is the center of most wood shops. To start, we should talk about personal protective equipment. Always wear eye protection and hearing protection. As a matter of fact, anyone in the room should be wearing hearing protection, not just the operators of the saw. If you have long hair, please tie it back so that nothing, and jewelry, secure that so that nothing is dangling and can get caught in any of the machinery. Wear closed-toed shoes to protect your feet, and if there's going to be a lot of dust, wear a dust mask, but you'll also be using the dust collections equipment that we have. The table saw really shines on making rip cuts, and rip cuts are cuts along the grain. There are other tools that a table saw can do cross cuts. If you're cutting across the grains of the wood, then you can use a table saw for that. But there's also things like the miter saw that you can use instead of the table saw. The saw looks like this, where there's the blade, and the blade has a blade guard on it to protect you. There's a little dial right down here which sets how high up and how low the blade is. And so the way it's going to work is you're going to put a piece of wood on this table, you're going to set the fence to the right distance, and you're going to push the board through, and as the blade spins, it's spinning down like this, it'll cut the wood, and it's actually, as it pushes, it's pushing it down into the table, which is a nice safe way to go. So you're going to set this fence to be the right distance away from the blade. And this fence has two purposes, not just to set the distance, but it also helps you keep the piece of wood that you're cutting smoothly going through the saw parallel to the saw blade. You unlock and lock the rip fence by moving this lever, and it just slides. The table itself should be clear of anything. Don't put tools, tape measures, other pieces of wood on there. It should be clear so that nothing gets in your way or nothing can vibrate into the saw blade. So what you're going to do is when you're all set up, you're going to flick the power switch. You're going to pull it towards you. And the nice thing about that is if there's anything that just doesn't seem right or you want to shut the tool off, you just bash that lever in and it'll turn off the saw. This is a saw that has a safety mechanism which will stop the blade almost immediately if there's any part of your body that touches the blade. And so this is a really safe saw, and there's a little green light that shows when that safety mechanism is ready. So again, the first thing you're going to do is adjust the height of the blade by spinning that little handle. And you'll make the blade go up and down, and you'll want the blade to be a little bit higher than the piece of wood. And I'm saying that this distance should be about 1/4 inch, so about 6 millimeters above the height of wood. It's safer than having a whole bunch of the saw blade exposed, and there's really not much need to have any more than that showing. So here's how you make a rip cut. Again, a rip cut is going the direction of the wood grain. So the wood grain's here, and you're cutting the same direction as the wood grain. So here's a better look at the blade guard. The blade itself is in here, but it's surrounded by these plastic pieces that will help keep your fingers away from the blade. It also has these little kind of spiky things which are called pawls, P-A-W-L-S, which will kind of hold the wood and prevent the wood from coming back at you. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what you're going to do is you're going to set the piece of wood on the table and you'll start pushing. But not only are you going to be pushing forward, this is important, you should be also kind of be pushing in towards this fence. And the reason is this fence, if you keep the wood against the fence, the wood is going parallel to the blade and will not be twisted or come and put any sideways pressure on the blade. And this will make a smooth cut. So you're going to be pushing in towards the blade and in towards the fence. Now, you need to keep your fingers at least 4 inches from the blade, so if you're making narrower cuts and you don't have room to keep your hands safe, use a push stick to push the wood in. There are different types of push sticks. There's a big blockier one here, which I think is really nice and safe and is nice and long. You can use the type that you feel most comfortable with, but that'll keep your hands a safe distance away. Now, even if you're using a push stick to push the wood through, you still need to have sinus pressure. You could do that with your, keeping your hand back there and pushing in, or a push stick, or you can use this feather board. And that clamps into this little slot right here, this miter rail. And what you can do is you're going to push it in a little bit so these things are slightly deflected. That means they're tending to push the wood against the rip fence here. And so now you don't have to worry about pushing it towards the fence. It'll be held towards the fence. You can just push the wood through. It's a nice little gadget. If you don't want to set up that, you could use a second stick to make the pressure against the fence. Oh, by the way, when you set up this feather board, you notice how the feather board ends before the blade starts? You do not want it over here, and you never want to push and pinch the wood against the blade here. So the feather board should be pushing before it reaches the blade. And same thing here. Let's say the blade is over here. You should stop using this second thing when the wood starts reaching the blade, so that you do not want to push it towards the fence or towards the blade itself. And just one little thing about where you put your push stick. If you kind of want to put your push stick right kind of smack in the middle of the wood, or maybe even a little bit closer to the blade, because if you're back here in the corner and you're pushing this way, it's tending to have a little twisting motion, and it could actually push the wood towards the blade, which is never good. If the blade gets caught, that's going to cause what we call a kickback, and we'll talk about that later. So instead of pushing off in the corner, just put your push stick right in the middle, or maybe even closer to the blade. That way it'll push it against the fence as well. Okay, this is not a rip cut, so you should not use the rip fence. This is wide here, and if you're trying to push this and slide a piece of wood and not have it rock back and forth and try to keep it flat against this fence, it's really hard to do, and you can't do it. So, and if you twist the wood, it's going to bind the wood into the blade, and that's not a good thing. So do not use your rip fence for a cross cut. This is a cross cut. As a matter of fact, you might not even want to use a table saw at all. You can use a track saw. If it's small enough, you can use a miter saw. You want the wood to feel, you want everything to be nice and solid and secure. So if the wood is really long, let's say you're pushing this through the saw like this, if you don't have a stand here, the wood will want to tend to tip down. And so back here in the saw, you'll be trying to push down to keep the wood from tipping. That's not a good situation. So set up a roller to kind of support the wood. You can do it on the out feed, which is after the blade. You can even set up one on the in feed back here where it's before the blades, just so everything feels nice and secure for you to just focus on pushing the wood straight through. If, when you're done with your cut, do not reach over the blade while it's spinning. Turn off the saw, wait for the blade to stop, and then you can grab your wood and the offcut. And if there's anything wrong with the piece of wood, stop, ask for help, because if there's bowed or warped pieces, they can be pinched in the blade and cause kickback. If you have a piece of wood, there's a lot of reclaimed wood, and if it has nails or staples or screws in it, that could damage the blade. There is a metal detector, so you can sweep the metal detector and just locate anything, problems before they start. And even with this pressure treater, it might contain lead. Just don't do it. We don't want any toxic dust. And if there's a loose knot in the wood, the knot is where there used to be a branch, and sometimes there's a plug of wood that's a little bit loose and can be knocked out or actually thrown out if it hits the blade. Just talk to an instructor and we'll check and help you through that cut. And if there's anything else that just doesn't feel right, even during a cut, just stop pushing the wood through, turn off the table saw, and ask an instructor for help. We can help troubleshoot. Okay, so we talked about rip cuts, and that's against the rip fence. Okay, this is a miter cut or a cross cut, which is going across. So this is, the grain is going this way, and we're cutting across the grain, so it's a cross cut. And you notice there is no rip fence in this being used in this cut. There's another little, it's called a miter gauge. This is a little device that's stored by the table saw, and you slide it in this little slot right here. This will hold your piece at a 90-degree angle, or I could actually set the angle. And together with these two hands, you'll just slide the piece through the saw and make the cut. So when you're done pushing the blade, the wood through the blade, and there's a cut, pull this away and then pull this back. Don't just slide it forward and then slide it back, because you just don't want that wood to be rubbing against the blade any more than you have to. So push it forward, pull the piece away, and you can pull everything back. Now, there is a little sled that we made that goes on the table saw, and it slides in these little tracks. And here's the blade right here. And what happens is that this supports your wood very nicely to make cross cuts, and you just push the sled through, and it'll make the cut. These pieces are nice and well supported, so talk to your instructor if you have lots of very accurate and small pieces to cut, cross cut. Okay, so the table saw is a wonderful device, and the main thing you have to pay attention to is what's called kickback. And that's when a little part of the wood touches the blade, well, actually is pushed against the blade or pinched against the blade, is caught on the blade, and the blade, since it's spinning, let's say it's caught in the back and the blade's spinning this way, the piece of wood can be thrown back towards you, the operator. And so the way kickback often happens is if you're pinching the wood against the back side of the blade. Again, the blade is spinning down, and so the front part, the blade is going down into the table, so it's pushing the wood down. But in the back, if you get caught here in the corner, it's pushing up and back, and so it can spin the wood, and it happens so fast that if you're pushing on this and the wood is spinning, it can actually bring your hand into contact with the blade. Now, you notice that the blade guard's not on here, so we are going to really minimize this risk, but it's still something that you should always think about. Essentially, the key is that you should never be pinching the blade or pinching the wood against the back end of the blade. And that's why you don't use the rip fence when you're making a miter cut. Even with a sled or a miter gauge, let's say the wood's at this point here. Look at this piece of wood. It's jammed between the fence and the blade, and so any slight rocking of that piece of wood can get it caught and make a kickback. Now, some people are tempted to use the rip fence because that way you can push the board up there, and now you know every single time the board is going to be cut this length. There is a way to use what's called a stop block. That means you can push the wood up against the block, but the nice thing about using a stop block is that the wood won't be all the way up against the fence, and you'll put the stop block back behind the blade. So that way, by the time the wood comes here, there's a gap, and that means that the wood can safely move away from the blade and not be pinched. Okay, so if you just pay attention to the safety instructions here and in the other training videos that we give you, this is going to be one of your go-to tools to do some amazing and detailed work. Thank you.